Oh, Mega Man Battle Network 3, a game I have gone on record as saying is the best in the series, at least as far as my memory can be trusted, which, to be fair, I've got the memory of a piece of Swiss cheese, so who knows. That said, having played this again, it's not as good as I remember, and I'm more than happy to admit that, but thus far, and bear in mind I'm up to playing Battle Network 5, this is still the best one I've played. Now, before we talk about this specifically, I should address that I am specifically talking about Battle Network 3 Blue. This was the one I played for my review. However, I have gone through and actually played both of them to completion, basically side by side, so I can go over the big differences, because this game was sort of released like Pokemon, where there were two alternate versions that were largely more or less the same game, but there were slight differences that could give one experience a slightly different sort of experience than the other. Although it's so minor, it's not really worth playing both games. Well, that's how it was more or less released in North America. That's not how they were actually for Japan. See, Battle Network 3 was actually in Japan, well, like Pokemon. Originally, Pokemon was released with Red and Green, but months down the line, they released Pokemon Blue, which was sort of a definitive edition director's cut, and if you're into actually collecting Gen 1 Pokemon, Pokemon Blue from Japan is the one you actually want, not Green. It's more or less the sort of definitive version of what this game is. Likewise, when they originally released Battle Network 3, they later on down the line released Battle Network 3 Black, which had some slight tweaks to gameplay to make it so that not necessarily one was better than the other, just slightly different. These were later released in North America as Battle Network 3 White and Blue, respectively. Yeah, I don't know why they changed Black to Blue, but if you want one version over the other, Blue is typically considered to be the superior version of the two. Now, the differences are actually pretty sweeping on the micro scale. Basically, everything is different. Smaller sprites in pretty much every background scene are totally different and replaced between the two versions. Individual enemy encounters have completely different pools of enemy placement and combinations, and even all of the individual battle chips are completely different coded. So if you have a specific strategy in mind, you might have to trade between versions, honestly. That said, the bigger version differences that typically get cited are style changes, where that system is back and I'm happy for it, but each version got one exclusive style. I'll talk more about that when we get there. Bosses. Each game got an exclusive boss. You've got the far cooler genie-themed Mistman from Battle Network 3 White, and the more bizarrely themed Bowl Man for Battle Network 3 Blue. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, Battle Network 3 Blue kind of got screwed with this one. Also, in addition to Bowl Man, Battle Network 3 Blue got an additional boss in the form of Punk, which originally basically meant nothing because you couldn't get a battle chip off of him, even though there was an item specifically there to upgrade it. I don't know either. Fortunately, the Legacy Collection returns that battle chip, so you can get it. You don't have to fight him for it, but you can get it. So yeah, Blue gets an extra boss as well. And then finally, battle chip classification. They kind of got a new way of being sorted, and the final classification got 5 exclusive chips for each version. It's typically considered that Blue is the better of the two, but that's mainly just because the most easily accessible of these battle chips is just a substantial upgrade to the other version in this. In White, you get Navi Recycle, which just gives you a hand of Navi chips back, but that's very specific. Battle Network 3 Blue gets Folder back, which lets you use all your battle chips again. Blue totally got the better one here. Either way, they are largely more or less the same game. You can pick one or the other. I'll go over, again, some of the other changes when we get to it, but largely, Blue is typically considered to be the best out of the two, and, I mean, having played both, yeah, I think Blue is probably the better of the two. Now, the overall story of Battle Network 3 features Lan Hikari and Megaman, freshly back from their summer vacation where they didn't do any of their homework. And if none of those names make any sense to you, go watch some of my other videos on Battle Network, because seriously, even for me, my views are low on those videos. Either way, they are back in school, except, oh no, World 3 seems to be back. And they're causing general mischief to get various bits of code so that they can unlock a mysterious thing. It's basically kind of the plot to the first game, actually, where they need to collect, X special thing from Y elemental thing. Except that this time, I mean, first of all, they don't only get 2 of the 4 things, and their plot still kind of works, because for some reason someone thought that worked in the first game, and they never address it. But also, you never actually see the 4 collectible things in this game. So, yeah, we just have to sort of take their word that they get these things, but they're trying to get these things to do an evil thing to take over the world and or destroy the world, basically. The greater through line is the N1 Grand Prix, a net battle competition to prove the greatest Navi and Operator combo. And while I absolutely hate tournament arcs, It's actually not terribly intrusive here because, well, first of all, there's only one real chapter that utilizes the N1 Grand Prix. The rest of the time, it's more or less a sort of background detail. You finish a chapter and then you have to go do some things like answer a quiz and fight some viruses. It's not a big thing, really. But it is a thing to just sort of justify Lan and Mega Man getting kidnapped again, somehow legally, because the people who are responsible for this completely get away with it for reasons. But either way, now Mega Man has to team up with his good old friends, Dex and Gutsman, Yai and Glide, the Eternal Navi who is completely useless for everything because he has zero combat aptitude and no sprites for it, as well as Mail and Roll, and finally, his bestest friend of all, Eugene Show and Proto Man, to finish off their rivalry and defeat World 3 for good. There's actually kind of some interesting plot to this game, don't get me wrong, the overall larger beats to it are kind of just throwaway, honestly. However, as you play this game, you sort of start to realize the past 3 games have sort of had an arc for its characters, and this game actually has the most characterization of all. For one thing, Lan actually has moments of character growth and depth. Like, he has a moment where he fails and he actually goes into sort of a introspective, depressive episode, and as someone who does that frequently, because depression be what it be, you know, it's kind of nice to see the guy lose for once and just sort of take it upon himself and realize he needs to grow and what's wrong with him. Likewise, you actually see his relationship in regards to his rival Eugene Show actually grow. Like, if you were paying attention from start to finish from the first game to now, Eugene Show hated him because Lan basically was just some civilian who kept getting in the way and destroyed a sting operation, to the second game, him actually trusting Lan enough to actually handle half the responsibility of half his missions, to now actually being a trusted rival and friend. You see that Eugene actually has a lot of personal issues with his family and specifically his father, and it affects him greatly. You really start to humanize who he is, and he's not this some sort of like insurmountable super like net battler that's just better than everyone else. In fact, the game goes into this to expressly state why he's as good as he is and why he does have that sort of air of perfection about him. And you start to see Lan finally start to realize who Show is as a person, not just this guy he hates, because that was kind of the first 2 games. Sure, he's still kind of annoyed by him, but you start to see him open up and kind of respect the guy, learn who he is as a person, and actually kind of grow to respect him in his own way. Even Base gets character development. You know, the guy who's just a secret final boss? Yeah, he actually has story import and actually develops into a character here. This game feels like kind of the pinnacle of storytelling when it comes to characterization in Battle Network. They just do so much to build on these characters and explain who they are, and to give them highs and lows to see them develop. If we define filler chapter as a chapter that doesn't have a bespoke dungeon dedicated to it, yeah, this one has more filler than the previous games. It has like almost half of it being filler chapters where you just run around the internet solving various very basic problems. And what's worse is 2 of them are stacked before the final dungeon, so you have to deal with like 2 filler chapters before you actually get to finish. I feel like they could have probably done substantially more with the individual dungeons in this game that they just didn't. Like, Bubble Man is crying out for his own dungeon, like, especially considering conceptually he's set in like a private network of like a very bespoke electronic device. Now, similar to the previous Battle Network games, the gameplay hasn't changed all that much. In the overworld, you can run around as Lan, and you can find various electronic devices where you can jack in, this game's words not mine, and plug Mega Man into the electronic device to have him run around the electronic world, either in smaller, secluded, closed circuit objects, or ones that are connected to the greater internet as a whole to solve problems somewhat asynchronously. Running around these environments, Mega Man will run into random encounters, and things are more or less the same from the previous games, although they added one very large feature that here is really just the start of a good idea. Similar to the previous games, you fight various opponents using your Buster and your various deck of battle chips in your customizable card deck. We'll get into that in a sec. However, really the only big difference combat-wise is they've sort of added a parry mechanic, sort of. If you kill an opponent on the same frames that they're actively attacking, you'll show that you knock them back, and you get bug frags for that. So they're no longer a special secret collectible. They're just one you get and you can grind for to buy stuff. This is really just the start of a good idea, though. As much as I like to dump on Battle Network 4, very much rightly so, having finished it, I can once again reaffirm that game is god-awful. It did improve the parry mechanic a little bit. That said, it is still a pretty solid, fun action RPG good time. Now, aside from your buster, you have your battle chips. Battle chips are similar, once again, to how they've always been. They can be separated by codes and types. You create a valid hand in combat by combining the exact same code or same type. Asterisk wildcard codes allow you to mix things up and create a far more flexible hand. There are, however, a couple new modifications to the battle chip system, and I mean on the smallest level, basically. Effectively, battle chips have new classifications, and the thing is, they kind of already did. In previous Battle Network games, you had Navi chips and regular battle chips, and that was kind of it. From this game on, for the rest of the series, battle chips kind of come in three flavors. You have your standard battle chips, which are more or less all the battle chips, basically. You have mega class battle chips, which your deck can only contain 5 at any one time, and these are basically just the Navi chips. Like, there are a couple that aren't Navi chips, but all the Navi chips are mega class, and they are the vast majority of them. And then finally, you have what is an actual change to the system, which is the Giga class chips. You can only have one of these in your deck at a time because they tend to be very, very powerful. And while I can't prove it, I think the game doesn't frequently draw these into your hands. These are actually really rare to pull out of your hand from like the first turn. But again, you only get one in your deck at any one time without some form of modification. Basically, these are super powered, and every Navi eventually gets one if you want to do a bunch of post-game nonsense, but effectively there's 5 in the game, and each of these 5 are exclusive depending on which version you have. Typically, again, people consider Battle Network 3 Blue to have the better ones with its folder back versus Navi Recycle, because you're more likely to use any sort of battle chip in your deck as opposed to specifically Navis, which you might not even have. Either way, that's really the biggest change to battle chips. The next ways you can influence combat are with, once again, one of the biggest aspects Battle Network has had implemented since the second game and in this game, and then immediately gets nuked off the face of the earth in the next ones forward: customization. Let's start with style change, because style change will see its last use in this game. I'm very angry about that. But effectively, if you're not familiar, style change is a way for the video game to quantify your combat style. It then gives you a permanent power-up that complements your style to allow you to enjoy the game your way. Now that said, there have been some modifications between the games. First of all, pretty much all of the styles have gotten some nerf in some way or another. For example, custom style now no longer gets you 2 extra battle chips in your hand from the start. There's a reason for this, and I'm not necessarily sure I like it, but there is a reason for this, and that is that as you level it up, you unlock those extra power-ups for your style. And this actually leads into the next customization feature, which I'll talk about in a minute. But effectively, all the styles from the previous game are back, except for hub style, which kind of has a thing that balances it out later on, again, post-game, but it's more or less not in this game, unfortunately. However, all the previous styles are still back, and we've got 3 new ones, with each version of the game getting 1 exclusive one. Let's start with Bug Style, the one that's available in both versions. Bug Style is unlocked by making Mega Man very, very glitchy. And if you beat like 300 fights, he turns into like a big walking glitch. It's probably one of the most powerful styles in the game. It's very, very neat, and it's definitely a gamble of a style. Effectively, in every single fight, the game will pull 2 random buffs and 1 random debuff that you have to play with. And these buffs could range from you getting more chips in your hand, to having a fully maxed out buster, to having a shield at the start. Those debuffs can also be cracking panels as you walk on them, which could be problematic. As well as, oh yeah, your health can be drained via poison while you're sitting there selecting your cards while the game is paused. That one's a bit scary. It should be noted that this is one of the big changes of the Legacy Collection though. They actually fixed one of the debuffs. In the previous versions, it was actually in and of itself bugged and would do nothing. That has actually been fixed. So unfortunately, Buster Blanks are back. So your Buster might just not shoot sometimes. But still, Bug Style also unlocks some incredibly powerful power-ups down the line. It is actually one of the most absolutely necessary styles you get if you really want to customize Mega Man to his fullest extent. The next new style is Ground Style. This style is exclusive to Battle Network 3 White, and it focuses primarily on modifying panel types. Your charge attack will crack panels underneath enemies, as well as your upgrades effectively modifying which panels you start with. It's actually pretty powerful in terms of its utilitarian use, but it's not really all that special. Conversely, Battle Network 3 Blue gets Shadow Style, which is probably one of the most powerful styles in all of Mega Man. Effectively, you become a ninja, and this ninja power-up is ridiculous because your charge shot then makes you invisible, which makes you invulnerable, although if you don't like that, you can turn that off I don't know why you ever would, though. You also have the ability to react to various attacks, allowing you to counter basically everything, as well as being able to not be damaged by various tiles, and I think you get air shoes as well as the fact that you can reflect shots, basically making it shield style rolled into a second style, kind of making shield style completely useless. And oh yeah, if you got wood style and you sat on top of a grass panel, you could be unkillable because, you know, you could just turn invisible just as you're about to die and oh, hey, you've got more health now. That's how I beat the final boss. I completely cheesed it, but it was impossible for me to actually die in this state. It is such a ridiculously powerful style, and it's very, very cool. Now, like I said, all the other styles are basically the same for Battle Network 2, so I won't go over them, but we do have a new mechanic for customization, and that is Navi customization, aptly named. The idea of Navi Cust is simple. You have a little grid of blocks that can be expanded as you progress through the game, and you have various little Tetris pieces you can slam in there to give Mega Man various power-ups. This is actually why Mega Man no longer has a level system, nor are there any permanent power-ups for his Buster, because it's now modularly designed. There are two different types of blocks you can add to this Navi customization panel. You have solid blocks as well as ones with little crosses in it. The cross ones tend to have smaller buffs, additional health, or Buster power-ups, etc., etc. The solid ones tend to be more substantial upgrades, such as Undershirt preventing you from dying from fatal damage, which, again, when combined with Wood and Shadow Style, you're unkillable. It's pretty awesome, and you get it from the jump. But you can also modify the different encounters you get from this. You can modify your armor rating. You can modify the kind of boots you have so that you can be unaffected by panels. These are very, very powerful. Now that said, there are some rules that must be observed, or else you cause a bug that doesn't work, except actually you can because there are secret codes to get past everything, and Battle Network 3 is just full of secrets and stuff. That's part of the reason why it's so good. This is also why styles had been nerfed, because you unlock those other features of those styles as Navi Cust programs. Effectively, as you level up your style, you unlock that style, and then you can carry it over to every other style to make you the ultimate perfect customized Mega Man, and it's freaking awesome. But like I said, there's a lot of secrets here. You can sometimes put in like completely invisible codes just by putting in passwords to add different power-ups to your character, provided you're not already bugged. Again, there's just so much here, and it's all about making Mega Man specifically tailored to your desires of how you want Mega Man to play, thus making this kind of the ultimate Battle Network in terms of player customization, which has sort of always been the core of Mega Man. I mean, there's always been a reason why you fight 8 robot masters at once. It's so that you can pick your own path through and tailor make your experience to how you want to play. I mean, Battle Network's all about customizing Mega Man. It's a shame the games after this are very reductive and don't seem to understand that. But either way, Mega Man customization is substantially better in this game. That said, here's one of the biggest issues this game has, and it's with the Navi customization. See, the game really wants you to use this really awesome feature that you probably absolutely use if they didn't force you to, but they kind of force you to. See, over the course of the game, you get 3 specific programs that are used at specific parts in the story. One is known as Alpha. It lets you see invisible stuff. You don't really need it if you know where it is, but the first time you play, you're going to use it. One is, I can't even remember the name, but it's based on temperature chips, and you need this for 2 specific chapters, and it's annoying because you have to then spend chips you've got to modify bits of the environment so that you can actually progress the story. It sucks that you have to resource management your battle chips like this. I absolutely hate this, but you only have to use it for 2 chapters, so it's not as bad as the last one, which is Press. I hate Press with a passion. Press is the reason why I have really any negative feelings towards this game, because Press sucks. So here's the deal. There are a bunch of paths in the internet that are very, 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 very minusculely tiny. Mega Man needs a special program known as Press to fit on them. The problem is that Press takes up a spot in your Navi customizer. Now, you could, in theory, remove it anytime you're not using it, but considering that Navi customization takes like 10 seconds if you're playing optimally between opening the screen and closing it, it's really not convenient to just take it out, put it in, take it out, put it in whenever you need it. And unfortunately, frequently, you'll like get past one tiny platform only to find another one. So if you did that, you're going back in to swap them out, and it's a giant, massive waste of time, and I hate it. Seriously, these Navi customization programs should not be forced upon you, and you need them, and it just slows everything down. And the thing is, you could just keep them on your Navi customization permanently. You could do that. That would save oodles of time. But then you're taking away from actually customizing Mega Man your way, and you're making him substantially less good because that space could be better taken up with anything else that isn't Press. And again, press is just the worst because of it, because pretty much from chapter, I believe, 3 onward, you're going to be using press in pretty much every chapter in some small way or another, and it's just annoying and intrusive, and I hate it. This is the worst part about Battle Network 3 right here. The only other thing about this game I find that is particularly negative are the Navi choices. Sure, Bubbleman is inherently lame because he's Bubbleman, and I think in this game he even realizes it because he's a massive coward, but the way they've built the Navis, they all seem to follow a very, very consistent theme that makes them not terribly fun to fight, and that is specifically that most of the Navis in this game are built defensively. A lot of them are just built with creating walls between you and stalling the fight out as long as possible. Drill Man, Desert Man, technically Flame Man, Bubble Man is particularly bad for this. The fact is, like, more than half of the Navis required for the main game are just designed to waste time and fill the field with crap so that the fights take longer and just aren't pleasant to play. This is especially problematic with Bubble Man because there is actually a really neat feature here in that in previous games, when you defeated a Navi, they would spawn an NPC invisibly somewhere in the world, and once you found them, you run into them as a random encounter for a 5% chance of encountering them. Here, once you find their ghost, they disappear to a completely different area that is built around their character. For example, Beastman will show up in Land's doghouse because he's an animal. And in fact, the little programs will even mention hearing some kind of wild animal. And there's lots of little clues to tell you specifically where they are, which is really quite nice. Unfortunately, Bubbleman specifically sucks because you have to go to a specific area, you have to equip a specific Navi-Cust program to make him spawn, and he will only encounter you if your HP is in the critical level, which is specifically problematic when his character is designed to create walls between you that actively hurt you and protect him. He will only fight you if you are basically next to dying, and he will fill the screen from the start with instant kill stuff because you're so low health. Unless you've got a folder full of battle chips that are designed entirely to heal you, fighting Bubbleman is really quite unpleasant. But I get it, he's a coward, that makes sense to his character, it's not fun. So after all this, you might be wondering why I still think this is one of the best Battle Network games, and that's a fair question. I mean, I did just slag off pretty much all of the Navis. I absolutely hate press and the Navi-Cust stuff they force on you, but specifically press because it's the worst offender. And this game has actually quite a lot of filler, and it's one of the shorter Battle Network games, so there's really no excuse for it. To wonder why I like this game under those circumstances is totally fair, but the answer is simply threefold. First, this is the peak customization experience in all of Battle Network. Combining both style change and the Navi-Cust was a stroke of genius, and it creates the most flexible combat system any Battle Network game will ever see, to tailor-make the experience specifically to how you want it to play, and that's huge for me. The second big aspect that makes me really love Battle Network 3 over the others, the post-game, because half of this game's content is post-game. It's a little sad that fighting Proto Man is entirely stuck in post-game, because that means you can't get the Proto Man program advanced, and this is actually the last time he's a mandatory character in any of the games, which is weird, considering I would argue Proto Man and Show are just as important to the story as Lan and Mega Man, but yeah, the next two games don't feature them at all depending on which versions you play, which is weird, because they're like necessary to the plot and have the most character growth out of anyone in this entire series. But like the previous two games, there is a pretty sizable post-game with 3 hidden areas to unlock. However, it's substantially bigger in this game. For one thing, there are all these sort of like secret obelisks in the secret areas that you can challenge, but you have to do a bunch of damage to them in a very specific way or you just can't get through them. Even if you were to play this game using like the special Buster Max mode, you still wouldn't necessarily be able to get through all of them. You have to solve various puzzles to unlock various ways to get through all of these secret areas, and all of these secret areas are like levels within levels within levels of secrets. There's a special chip trader near the end, there's a special merchant near the end, there's a bunch of special programs and other crazy stuff. There is a lot of secret stuff here. Half the battleships in the game are delegated to stuff you can only get in the post game, some of which actually requires a very specific style to even unlock some of them, which is mind-blowing. Heck, you can't even experience the whole Pokemon system this game has until you hit the post game. Oh crap, I haven't even talked about the Pokemon system in this game. Yeah, there's a Pokemon system. It doesn't get introduced until like the penultimate chapter, which is a weird thing to do, but basically you can find various viruses in the world, take them home, make them your best friends, and then use their powers to fight enemies by feeding them and maneuvering the various power levels between them, because every battle chip you get relative to your Pokemon viruses swaps between all 4 variations of that virus, so you kind of have to manage the power levels between them all. And it's not necessarily even a power thing, some of them might just attack differently than the other variations of that virus. It's a neat system that never gets mentioned again, and it's weird because, like, they've been actively showing since the first game that, oh yeah, the villains have been using Navis that can just control viruses. Why can't we do that? Oh, we can in this game, that's great. Except we have to wait till almost the end of the game to get there, and it's never done again. Battle Network 4, you ruined a lot of things, and you continue to do so because you're Battle Network 4. But my point is that the post-game to this is huge. You've got like 6 exclusive post-game bosses. And even once you've done all that, you unlock like different tiers of bosses that can unlock Giga Chip variations of them that will do more damage depending on how fast you beat them. There is so much here. Like, you could spend forever on the post game. There's just so much content here, and it is genuinely the most robust post game out of any Battle Network game ever. The last thing about Battle Network 3 that I really love about it is just its secrets. There are secrets within secrets within secrets in this game. There are secrets tied to a wafer system that you can go down, you can buy some wafers, you'll get some codes, and these codes can actually be used in-game. Some of these codes were actually tied to a real-life wafer cookie that you could buy in Japan and then put the code into the game. Some of the chips in this game and other unlockables were only available that way. They modified some of that so that you could do it in-game for the West, but yeah, there was like real-life ARG nonsense tied to Battle Network 3. Some of the codes to Navicust bugs, as well as other things, were actually hidden within the god-awful anime this game had. Okay, it had one good episode, and again, and it was because of Evil Roll, but either way, they had stuff tied with cross-promotion nonsense, and you'd only see it if you were really paying attention, and you decided, I wonder if that works in my game. Oh, holy crap, it does work in my game. That's amazing. There are so many characters that are just hidden everywhere that will give you secret stuff if you find them. There are secrets within secrets within secrets, and it feels like a never-ending labyrinth of stuff to do that's interesting, and it feels so bloody brilliant when you find it. Like, okay, a lot of that's been busted open by the internet now that, you know, guides are more of a prevalent thing, but there's still so much stuff in this game to discover and find on your own, and it just makes you feel so bloody brilliant, and like you've just discovered this entire world of mystery ahead of you. And this is genuinely like the most mysterious game because of how much weird secret stuff in it. And I love that. This game is brilliant. Battle Network 3 has its issues. It has way more filler than it has any right to be. It's the shortest out of any of the games. And when they force Navicust on you, it's terrible. But it also has the best customization, the best secrets, and the most robust post-game that's arguably larger than the main game. This game does so much if you're willing to actually go into the labyrinth of stuff to do in this game, and it all feels meaningful to creating an interesting and engaging experience, both in terms of combat and exploring this world, and I love it. The overall presentation to Mega Man Battle Network 3 is the end of an era. This is the last time we will get to see the sprites they've more or less been recycling from the first game, and while that sounds good, they come up with a new art style I do not care much for. It's substantially less detailed, although it is more colorful, which is cool. But yeah, this is the last time we get to see these specific sprites with this kind of level of detail. And it's kind of sad to think that they'll just be gone forever after this. Similarly, it's the last time we get to hear the Mega Man Battle Network theme because they changed it with the fourth game, and decided to keep going in that direction for reasons I don't really understand, but that's how things are. Overall, the presentation, if you like the previous games, it's fairly similar, and it has a lot of nice little callbacks. Now, if you want a copy of Mega Man Battle Network 3, specifically blue, but if any version's fine, well, actually the cheapest version I'm seeing on eBay right now is blue for 20 bucks. And that's actually an absolute steal because this is one of the most content-rich games on the Game Boy Advance. Seriously, the story might be a little bit short, but the amount of secrets and post-game stuff, there's a huge amount of stuff to do in this game. And for 20 bucks, that ain't too bad. You could also get this in the Battle Network Legacy Collection, either Volume 1 or the whole set, which I will once again remind you does not contain the entire legacy of Battle Network, and similar to all the other Legacy collections, Capcom refuses to give us the best versions of anything, because we're getting inferior versions of Battle Network 5. And I know that because I'm playing it right now on stream. You should go watch that, along with my beautiful 3D printed Mega Hair that I worked forever on. But either way, Battle Network 3 Blue is genuinely one of the best games on the Game Boy Advance, honestly, I think. Like, I like the first 3 Mega Man Battle Network games. The fourth one was awful. The fifth one tried to make it better and was really more quizzical than anything. The sixth one kind of came back into quality, but I think the third one was the pinnacle of Battle Network. Sure, it has a lot more problems than I remember, but it had the most customization, it had the most content, it had the biggest amount of secrets and like post-game and just stuff to engage you. Honestly, I think this was probably the most brilliant Battle Network ever was. But I can totally see why people would hate it for the press program, the terrible Navi choices, and the amount of filler it gets, because it really does not deserve that filler. Battle Network 3 is sort of the end of an era. Battle Network was always built as basically 2 trilogies. The first focusing on the technology and Mega Man's connection to LAN through the technology itself, and then the latter trilogy focusing on more occult stuff for reasons I don't really understand. They have completely different feels and themes, and honestly, the original trilogy I just prefer, and this, to me, is sort of the best one. I think Battle Network 3, for me, is kind of like a sine wave pattern. It has its highs, it has its lows, and if you're only going to measure the lows, it's not going to compete with the second game. But if you're willing to take it for what it is, I think on average it's still better than the second game, even if it is a lot shorter. But of course, there's a lot more post-game stuff to do, and a lot more secrets to find. That said, Mega Man Battle Network 3, to me, is one of the most must-have Game Boy Advance games. It's just one of the ones I have the fondest memories of, and while it's certainly nowhere near as good as I remember, it's still really special, and it's still an unbelievably high-quality experience. Well, we did some damage to him at least. Undershirt? Crap. Okay, new plan. We're taking off that shield.